What's up, guys? How's it going? I hope everybody's doing okay and feeling positive during this tough time we're all going through. I usually don't do these types of videos or any video like this, vlog, whatever you want to call it, at all. Usually I'm behind the camera, not in front of it. I don't really feel comfortable in front of the camera, so apologies in advance if I feel a bit awkward in this. It's come to a point where, like many of you people, and especially you creative folks, you might be feeling a bit frustrated and trying to find ways to express yourself creatively. I've been doing a lot of writing recently, even for the past year, but just especially the last 2 weeks, I've really been cracking down on a lot of things. But there was this other part of me that wanted to do something more engaging and interactive, I guess, just to put something on Facebook, engage people in a positive manner. So what I wanted to do was make a video like this where I would recommend 5 films for people who are in quarantine right now to check out, and not just any 5 films. 5 films that I would consider, or some people would consider, hidden gems, or titles that might not be well known or as popular or mainstream as other titles. Great films that either when they came out, they just, you know, they were misunderstood and they gain a cult following later on, or just films that have never been discovered but that hold great quality and great value. Originally I was going to go with just recommending you films from the 70s, since it's my favorite decade of cinema and the decade that inspired me the most as a filmmaker. But I decided to just mix it up and put a bunch of oldies, if you want to label them that, together, spread out through different decades, and hopefully this could be of some interest to some of you. What I've always found fascinating is that people that I work with, whether it's my colleagues or other filmmakers like myself, or people who are just infatuated with cinema, consider themselves cinephiles, there's always been this hesitancy, even with these people. Now, I'm not saying all people, I'm not saying all these people, I'm not trying to pinpoint or target a certain group. That's not the goal of this video, and I apologize if that's an issue for anybody. What I'm getting at is that there's certain people that I've met in my lifetime who, you know, who love cinema, but there's an issue when it comes to anything that's of a certain time, or anything that's older, or anything that's prior to so and so years. Oh, it's black and white. You know, dialogue is hokey, special effects aren't good, it's too old, it's outdated. And basically, I guess this video is to show that there's so many great titles, so many great pictures that hold so much substance and greatness and quality all across the board, that, you know, a lot of films nowadays with high budgets and great production value, you know, in my opinion, they pale in comparison. Just a forewarning that some of the titles that I'm going to be recommending you today aren't the easiest to recommend, just because of some of the subject matter. I mean, it's just a personal preference, but I prefer more dramatic or films with a more serious subject matter, serious themes. As a preference of mine, they would be classified more auteur cinema or art house cinema. So I understand it's not for everybody, and it's okay if you don't enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are interested, I hope that you know, some of you will be interested in checking some of these out. The first film I'm going to talk about is called The Addiction, from 1995, directed by a very notorious but very favorite filmmaker of mine called Abel Ferrara. Abel Ferrara is most known, I guess his most mainstream work was King of New York in 1990 with Christopher Walken. It's a cult classic gangster picture that became really popular within the hip-hop scene. The Addiction is some of his later work, well, not too much later, but sometime in the 90s, where I believe that he was at the peak of his game. Now, The Addiction is it's hard to classify this one, it's a gothic vampire psychological horror flick, and also kind of coming of age story, which is kind of interesting, that follows Lily Taylor, who plays the lead. And basically it's an allegory, it's a metaphor for the director himself at one point in his life, where he was a self-admitted heroin and I believe morphine addict. So The Addiction is an allegory to his personal addictions. The lead character, played by Lily Taylor, is bitten by a vampire one day, and it's basically, you know, her life changing, her having to come and accept her new way of living. And, you know, she starts to hang inside during the day and only goes out at night, and she starts getting this appetite and this taste for blood, obviously, and it's this addiction that she cannot control. And it's just this, the themes are really heavy, and of course it's not an easy film to watch, as are most of the films on this list. But, you know, for me, this is cinema at its purest. It's you'll get something out of it if you really enjoy that deep psychological stuff. It's a wonderful film, and I think some of you, not all of you, some of you will really enjoy it. Second film I'm recommending is called Wait Until Dark. It's a picture from 1967 starring Audrey Hepburn. The best way I can classify this film is the Hitchcock film that Hitchcock never directed. It's directed by Terrence Young. I'm not too familiar with his whole filmography, his whole body of work, but what a film this is. It is just pure Hitchcock. It's not an homage to Hitchcock or anything, but the suspense and the tension is just, it's unbearable, but in all the right ways. A lot of the exterior shots in the opening sequence of the film were shot in Montreal. And you actually see Trudeau Airport in 1967 and how bare bones it was compared to today. It's just land, and everything is so old, and obviously it's decades before my time. So, but it's just a wonderful thing to see, and that's just a little, you know, that's a little thing on the side that just adds to the whole film and the whole experience. Audrey Hepburn is a blind woman, and she unknowingly has possession of a doll that carries cocaine, and there's 3 criminals, these hardcore, like, brute tough criminals, one of them led by Alan Arkin, who gives a great performance, that are trying to manipulate their way into Audrey Hepburn's home and, you know, pass themselves off as anything from a plumber or mechanic needing to check something in the house, just to find this doll with all that, with all the drugs inside. There are maybe a couple aspects that are slightly outdated, but nothing, you know, it's a couple lines here and there. It's nothing extreme that'll take you out of the film. I believe AFI, American Film Institute, named the climax of this film, the final 10 minutes, in the 100 scariest moments of all time in films. This, mind you, this goes back to, I believe they released that list in 2007, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, the ending is just like heart pounding, edge of your seat, like, you know, what the fuck is gonna happen? It's amazing. I highly recommend it. The third film on this list is called Blue Collar. Very underrated, very unheard of film. Came out in 1978, written and directed by one of my favorite filmmakers, Paul Schrader. Paul Schrader, of course, is most famously known, if you had to categorize him in a more mainstream type of medium, would be the writer of Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. So obviously it's going to carry those very hardcore, dark, heavy themes. It stars Yaphet Kotto, Harvey Keitel, and Richard Pryor, and one of his more non-comedic roles, one of the very few non-comedic roles that he's ever done. He plays it very seriously, although he's just as hilarious as he's always been. I'm a huge fan of Richard Pryor. And basically, these 3 guys are blue-collar workers, hence the title. So they're like mechanics, factory workers, building cars, manufacturing cars, and all that stuff. You know, they don't get paid well, and they're part of a very poorly organized union. It's affecting their family life, and it shows all that. So one day, all three of them decide, hey, screw this. Let's just rob our union. Let's rob let's rob the union of the money. And it's kind of a heist gone wrong when they start to become suspects, and when their union becomes suspicious of them, of trying to steal money from them, rob money from them. It turns into this whole paranoia thriller. This whole Big Brother's watching you, and this union trying to, I'm not going to give too much away, but they have a lot of sinister intent and what they want to do with these 3 men, and it's just extremely riveting. Highly recommended. Blue Collar. If you guys love a classic mystery or murder mystery thriller in the vein of like Chinatown, Angel Heart is the film for you. Angel Heart, released in 1987, I believe directed by Alan Parker, phenomenal, underrated filmmaker of his time, starring Mickey Rourke when he was a thing, before his little setback, and with a special appearance by Robert De Niro. This film is the pinnacle of murder mystery, under your skin, who goes there, who done it, what's going on. It is a film with so many twists and turns that go so dark, so extreme. It's honestly, it's not an easy watch at all. It's super unnerving and it really gets under your skin. But me, I'm a sucker for mystery thrillers. That's a lot of the material that I like to write. Very inspired by that stuff. It's this great story where Mickey Rourke plays the lead. He's a classic private detective, and he gets hired one day by Robert De Niro, who's also a shady character himself, to find this missing guy who this guy's been declared missing for a decade or so, I believe, and who owes Robert De Niro a lot of money. And Mickey Rourke just finds himself in this downward spiral, this loop of like madness and insanity and shit that he uncovers that he just never wanted to know. And it's a really big, if you love twists, it has an incredible twist. I also forgot to mention that Lisa Bonet stars in it as well. She's fantastic in it. I think she might have been underage in the film or just borderline 18, and some of the stuff she does is pretty intense. All right, the last film I'm gonna recommend you is a film, a lot of people might have heard it by name and might have heard bad things about it just because it's had this really nasty or questionable reputation about it throughout its whole course. That film's called Cruisin, 1980, directed by William Friedkin, who is most known for directing The Exorcist. This film stars Al Pacino. It's another murder mystery, but it's a murder mystery that caused a lot of controversy back when it was released in 1980, and William Friedkin, having made The Exorcist, is no stranger to controversy. This film follows Pacino as another private eye, being hired to infiltrate the leather bar scenes in the late 1970s and early 1980s, where there's this serial killer going around murdering gay men. And it's one of the most shocking and intense. I mean, just the subject matter alone, just the premise is pretty hardcore. And when that came out in 1980, even now that's serious subject matter. In 1980, this film was getting panned by critics, by everybody. Everything surrounding it was just negativity. And one interesting fact about this is that Cruisin is based off the novel. I forget the name of the author, but the novel is based off a series of murders that were happening in the end of the 1970s in New York. The interesting fact is that years after this movie was released, they ended up finding and arresting and charging the man who was murdering all these people. He was an extra. He had a very bit role in William Friedkin's The Exorcist. So you had William Friedkin, who directed Cruisin, who directed this film based off a novel about a serial killer murdering men at a certain time, and that same man was an extra in a scene in his own film, The Exorcist. It's a scene where Linda Blair's character, the young girl, she's having an MRI exam done on her or a brain scan, I believe. And it's these two doctors that are strapping her in, and one of the two doctors is that killer. So that's just like, I don't know, if that's not fate, I don't know what is. That's fucked up. Well, there you have it. That's it. I hope some of you guys got a kick out of it. Even if you're not interested in any of these titles, I hope maybe this video at least helped you guys in this quarantine a little bit and maybe kill the time. And for those who are interested in checking out these titles, I'm happy that this video did that for you. I don't know if I'll ever do a video like this again. I'm hoping the quarantine is, fingers crossed, done on May 1st like they say it is. And we can go back to living, and I can go into pre-production for my next short, which I'm really excited for, as opposed to making these types of videos. But if it's a one and done, I'm happy for it. I'm happy about it. And that's it. Maybe I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for taking the time to watching this very long video, and enjoy the rest of your quarantine.